watching you work with Kevin reminds me a lot of what I've heard you say about yoga being a controlled stress environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, controlled in the sense that it's self-selected.
Right.
You know, yeah, yoga as a controlled stress experience. In the sense of control, what I mean is that you've decided to engage in this. You know, you put yourself in the room, you put yourself on the mat, you've put yourself in that situation. So what's not present, at least on that level, which is a lot of times when we're experiencing stress, is that there's no one else to blame it on. Right? It's like, you can walk out. You know, you put yourself there. So that element is gone. It's self-selected stress in that sense. And we're doing things outside of the ordinary. This is the tapas part of the equation. You know, we're putting our body and our breath and our mind and our emotions into all these unusual positions, all these unusual arrangements. And it's not so much about achieving the pose or the shape or the practice as what arises for us or within us in those experiences and how we respond to these sensations. So we get to rearrange our responses to stress in that situation. And it is training for life, because, you know, when we're out there in the world and, you know, living our lives and we're subjected to stressors, a lot of times we didn't choose, you know, what's coming at us. But we may be able to employ some of those skills that we gained in yoga about choosing how we respond to it. You know, it's always how we respond, how we choose to respond to the things we didn't choose. I think that's the real equation there. And that's quite often what's missing, is recognizing that how we respond to the stresses of life is a choice. Because so quite often, the stress happens and a response happens so quickly, we think that our response is the stress. When in fact, they're two separate things. And I'll never forget the moment that I learned that, you know, and it's very clear in my mind. I know exactly when I made that identification in a way that I would never forget. And this is actually a chapter in the book. It's called The Enlightenment of the Dumpster. Have you ever told that one? No? Oh, I'll tell that sometime. But it has to do with, you know, when I was running the Shivananda Center in Los Angeles. I was transferred there in the spring of 1981. And the building where the center was attached to another building called the Liquor Locker. It's right on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, where Laurel Canyon comes out on Sunset. And there were these windows in the meditation room where we'd gather every morning for our morning meditation. We're being very spiritual at 5:30 in the morning, sitting silent meditation for about a half hour before we do our Sanskrit chanting. This was the routine. You know, it was like a little mini ashram routine. And the dumpster for the Liquor Locker sat right under that window. And guess when the truck came to empty it every morning?
5:30.
About 5:30, between 5:30 and 6 every morning, the dumpster would come. And what is in the dumpster of
Empty bottles.
a liquor store? Yes, empty glass bottles. So you can imagine the racket this thing is making right outside our meditation window every morning. And I'm, you know, outwardly, I'm looking like this. Inwardly, I am so pissed off every morning, like, who the hell decided to put a yoga center next to a liquor store? This is stupid. And Sunset Boulevard is noisy enough, and now we've got the dumpster and the, you know, the glass and the, you know, I was not I was meditating on being upset, if you could, yeah, you know, and it was just because it was noisy. It was noisy and it was just disturbing, and we're trying to be peaceful and quiet, you know. But what happened eventually was that I started thinking about it. Well, is it really noise, or is it just sound? And I started thinking, well, are there some sounds that are just upsetting in and of themselves, like intrinsically upsetting, disturbing sounds, right? So I began thinking, well, glass in a dumpster. Then I thought, well, no. If I was the owner of the liquor locker, I would be happy that my dumpster is being emptied. I'd go, oh, they're here. They're emptying my dumpster. I have more room for more broken glass and nasty shit I'm throwing in my dumpster. I'd be happy to hear that sound. And I think, okay, what about a siren? Sirens, you know how you cover your ears, right? Yes. Yeah, but what if you're in a burning building and you hear the siren? That means that help is coming, right? That would be the sound you want to hear most in the universe. So I'm going through this whole list of like really loud, annoying sounds, and I can always find some context in which somebody is going to experience it not only as pleasant, but as like exactly the sound they want to hear. So this is this is what I'm doing in the mornings, you know, when I'm supposed to be chanting my mantra. I was never good at mantras. Anyway, so what I began to realize is that sound is sound. It's moving air. Sound is pressure waves propagating through the air molecules. That's all it is, okay? It's when it hits my eardrum and enters my brain that something turns it into noise. The noise was in my head. The sound is what's happening out in the world. The unpleasantness that is interpreting it as noise was here. And I remember the moment I made that identification. It was in the midst of the dumpster being emptied yet again. And all of a sudden, it was like there was this crack of daylight in between what was going on in the moving air molecules and what was responding in my head. And in that crack of daylight, this whole universe opened up where I realized that all of the annoying, stressful, terrible shit I had been angry about in my life, you know, may not be that way. Maybe it was me. And I was contributing to it. And that crack of daylight, you know, got wider and wider. And, you know, I could sit there and just allow the dumpster to be moving air molecules and not have it turn into noise. And I realized that this applies to not just the dumpster, it applies to everything, you know? And it was a real moment of clarity. And it was a big, big lesson, you know? And sometimes, you know, that's what it takes, being exposed to the stress on a daily basis, right? And what I realized was this was the perfect place for a yoga center, right? Because if you can only meditate where you're off in a cave somewhere where it's really quiet and, you know, pleasant, what good is the skill? You know, but then, you know, when I realized that it wasn't just about the external input, what about the internal input? I was reacting to my own thoughts that way. I was reacting to my own emotions that way. And I thought they meant something. You know, I thought my reactions to my own internal noise was the noise. But it's just like the sound is propagating pressure waves in air molecules, thoughts are just vrittis in your chitta, to use the Sanskrit term. It's just what the mind does. You know, we don't have to identify with it. I didn't anyway. And so it became a real inspiration for understanding what the teachings are really trying to tell me. You know, and it happened right there, you know, on Sunset Boulevard, having the dumpster emptied from the liquor locker. I still go back to that corner when I'm in LA and revisit the dumpster, just for old time's sake. The yoga center's not there anymore, but the dumpster is.
Meditate.
What's that?
Today.
Yeah. So, where's your dumpster? You know, what's your dumpster in your life, right? So.